We've got some good information to cover today. So I just ask that you put your microphones on mute so that I'm not hearing some of the background noise I'm getting right now. And I may pop in and ask you to, put in your 2 cents or share your thoughts on how things have been going. But today what we are talking about is buyer consultation. I am finding as I'm calling people in the launch program and asking them how things are going with their top 5 and just how business is going in general, there are a good number of people that are not doing buyer consults. And I know that it is an uncomfortable thing to ask somebody to sit down with you and have a meeting. It feels like that momentum they have going, they just want to go look at a house and you just want to get them into a house and you want to go and write an offer. It feels like you're stopping that, and that feels counterproductive. But I promise you that taking a moment to get people set up for success is going to set you up for success. If you have experienced this, I have myself. There's the occasion where I don't have a buyer consult for one reason or another, or when I first started out, I was just so excited to be working with someone new. I just wanted to get out there on showings, and 10, 20, 30 houses later, we haven't written an offer. They're totally all over the place with what they're looking for. We're not on the same page. I've been running in circles. It's not a successful relationship. And so having that buyer consultation sets you up. It sets up their expectations, your expectations. It sets up who the expert is and what you're going to do for them. And it also sets up what you're expecting from them. It's just a really good way to get on the same page. And it's also an excellent way to talk about what the market's doing and prepare them emotionally and in terms of their finances and having their ducks in a row before you're getting out there. Because everybody knows right now, if you're in the meeting this morning, homes are selling even faster now. They're selling still for strong prices. We are still seeing multiple offer situations. People who are brand new to the market might not know that. And we can't assume that they do. So it is super, super critical, especially right now when you're working with a buyer, that we take the time to sit down with them and find out what they're looking for and what their price point truly is, because there's a chance that they won't get in the market for that. They may be seeing homes listed for $250 and they think that's exactly what we want. What they don't know is those houses are selling for $275. So it's really important that we're setting their expectations early, that we're qualifying them as a buyer who is going to find success in this market or not, and that we are making sure that we are all on the same page with that. It's going to save you a ton of time and frustration, and it's also going to serve them better. Nobody wants to be running all over town with somebody who's ultimately very disappointed, doesn't like working with you because they're not getting what they want and they don't understand why. And then they go off and work with somebody else or tell their friends, don't work with that person. It's just not worth it. So it's worth putting the time in to do a buyer consultation, and it does not need to be complicated. Raise your hand if you're doing a buyer consult right now. If you've done them recently, if it's part of your regular activities. You can comment if you're not on video, since it seems like most people aren't. But I see this as one of the most important uses of your time as an agent. And I'm really, really glad that when I started, I had mentors who told me early on, do this. And I sought out videos and things to help me figure out how to go about doing that. So it's really, really critical. And the cool thing is, once you're in the routine of doing it, then you don't have to, it should just be like riding a bike. You practice before you're getting out there and talking to real people who are your potential clients. And then you just have your booklet, your outline, your interview page, whatever it is, ready to go. Make a few copies or have it in your laptop or on your phone and just be ready to use it. And so every time you get a new appointment, it's not reinventing the wheel. You're using what you already took the time to put in place. And that's why it's one of your top 5. So when it comes to a buyer consultation, there's a few main parts to that I think are really important to address. And we talked a little bit about this before, but I want to make sure we're on the same page with that. So I really like to have an interview page, and I'll share these questions on the Facebook page. I'll get this to Mandy to put up there, or Megan to put on the launch group. But I take this opportunity to make sure I have all my ducks in a row and the information I need about these people. Nobody wants to have to ask their buyer what their last name is when they've shown them 10 houses and are now writing an offer. You should have found that out when you first met. That's an awkward thing to have to ask about. So, sorry, my dog is really freaking out here. What? So the things I like to ask in the buyer consultation. First thing is I want to make sure I've got all their contact information correct. So I'm asking each person, first and last name, how do you pronounce it? What's your full legal name? Because that's what's going in an offer, right? What do they prefer to go by? Their phone number and their email. And this should be the email they want to use to get listing updates, to sign documents. Each buyer has to have their own email for signatures. So when you're working with somebody who has like a partner email together, they're going to need separate ones for signature. I like to find out what they do for a living and where they work. This helps me figure out, well, usually helps me figure out where they're coming from to go to showings, so I can kind of anticipate the timeline. It also tells me what they're good at or doing on a daily basis. You may find that they are in construction, and so they know home building. You may find that they're an attorney, and so they really know contracts. You may find that they're an engineer, so they're probably really detailed. It's going to tell you a lot about that person and be really helpful. What dog? Come here. You want to say hi? She had surgery last week, so she's being a bit of a princess about it. Okay, you good? You saw everybody? Okay. Gracious. Sorry about that. The joys of working from home. So those are the things I like to ask. I also like to find out how they prefer to communicate, and whether that's text, email, phone call, and best times for them for showings. So are they working 9 to 5? Do they have varied schedule? Are they off every other Friday? This is good information for you to have now, so that when you're scheduling showings later, you're not going back and forth 100 times trying to figure out, well, are you free then? Or like, what works for you? And just get that out of the way. That is also the opportunity when I let them know I am best reached by text, and I typically am off on Sundays, but I always have people available for showings just in case, and that I tend to get away from my phone by 9 p.m. unless there is something time sensitive or an emergency. It's there, but I'm not responding after 9 p.m. And not before 9 a.m. So set your hours, set the expectations. That's reasonable. Everybody else has hours, you know, and it really shows that you care, that you want to find out when they're available. The next thing that I also include, and this helps me track them in command, because after this, they go into command, if not before, is to find out where they heard from about me. So was it a referral from my past clients? Was it my sphere? Did I meet them in an open house? All of those things go in to command as well. So good thing to track where your leads are coming from, just like James Shaw said this morning. Next section of the questionnaire or the conversation is related to their motivation and their timeline. And what I typically do before I get into this page is I do a little bit of that forward conversation, that you know, care conversation, where I'm finding out how they're doing and you know, how things have gone. A lot of the answers to this will come out in that little intro conversation. It's a good way to build a relationship, especially when you're doing this by video. It's kind of tricky, and you don't want to just jump into business. So like have a little conversation at the start. But once you get that contact info, their job, their preference for communication, their typical schedule, this is also a great time to make sure they're still employed, because if they are furloughed, they're probably not going to qualify for a pre-approval. So again, you're qualifying them too, saving yourself some drama. The next section is going to be, where are they coming from in this home search? So I want to know, are they a first-time buyer? If it's a couple, are they both first-time buyers, or does one of them have some experience in the past? That's going to definitely put a lens on how they experience all of this and how they respond to things. Why do they want to move? What's their motivation? This is huge. If they don't have to move or they have to move, that should determine how you're serving them, and also help you get an idea of whether they're going to be more choosy, move faster, be really in this to win it. And you might get different answers from each person. So this is a good time to, you really should make sure you're getting both people if it's a couple. Otherwise, you're only getting half the story. And I can tell you, only doing a consultation with one person of a couple is almost like not doing one at all. So make sure you can schedule time when they're both available. The other thing I want to find out is how long have they been looking? Have they been thinking about this for a long time? This is when I find out if they've been to open houses. Have they called listing agents to see properties? What are they using for online shopping? How aware are they of what's going on in the market? What's their familiarity? And have they potentially bumped into some agent who they may not realize they have a relationship with already? When would they like to move? And I think that's easier for people to say, like, when do you want to be in your new home? Don't get them too caught up in the timelines of things. You know, when do you want to have an accepted offer? That doesn't mean anything to them. So find out when they want to be in their new home. And then this is a great time to have a conversation about timelines. People don't know, how long does this take? You know, accepted offer to closing, very typically right now in the price range I'm working in, is 35 to 45 days. It's pretty common. And the typical range, I'd say, is 30 to 60 days from accepted offer to closing. So, you know, if you want to be in your new home by June, 30 to 60 days to close, we should be looking like now, because you have to get an accepted offer and then go through the process. And from the time you start looking to the time you have an accepted offer, for me is 1 to 2 months. Most people see 5 to 10 houses, and we write an offer. A lot of times that first offer is accepted, but sometimes it's the second one. This is where I bring in a note about there's competition. We're going to come across competition with any house. Be prepared to be in competition. There's going to be other offers, there's going to be multiple offers, and they're going to be over asking price. So just setting those expectations. This can all kind of fold into this conversation. However you want to set this up, it's up to you, but you should have some kind of outline to keep you on track, because the thing that can very easily happen is you will be sitting down and talking to them for more than an hour, and that's too long. It's too long for anybody. So make sure you've got a plan, you're sticking to it, and you're in control of the conversation. But that does not mean that you are talking the whole time. Being in control of the conversation is keeping things on track. But I highly, highly recommend that you find a way, and practice is how you figure this out, practice with each other or with friends, family, is that you make sure you're not talking more than half the time. And this is tricky because you're spending a good amount of time educating them, but it is so, so important that you know where they're coming from and you know what they're looking for. And the more you let them talk, the more you're going to find those things out. And if you are a good listener, they're going to think you're fabulous. So make sure that when you're doing this consultation, it's not a one-sided conversation. So you start out, you have a little chat, you get their basic information, contact info, etc. You find out, if they're a first-time home buyer, how long have they been looking, when do they want to be in their new home, fold in what you're what you know about the market, what you're seeing. So timeline from accepted offer to closing, 30 to 60 days, how long it takes to write an offer, how many homes they might need to see. This is also a good time to mention how showings are happening. We're still getting out there, but we're taking safety precautions. There may be some restrictions on getting into properties, so we want to give them a heads up. More than a day is ideal. We also want to jump on it pretty quick because homes are selling quickly. Like you saw in the meeting this morning, inventory is crazy low and demand is pretty dang high, and people are getting back out there. So this is a time to be ready to jump. And getting a clear idea of their financial situation. So do they need to sell their current home? this is a good opportunity for you to talk about listing it. It also helps you figure out whether you need to navigate that part of the conversation. You know, do we need to sell in order to buy? Can we buy first? How does that look? So even if you just table that and make note and come back to it, at least you know. When does your lease end if you're renting? That's huge. If they're month to month, do they have to give a 60-day notice? That's pretty typical. So knowing how that's going to line up. This is also a point in the conversation where I oftentimes will mention how mortgage payments work. Most people don't know this, and it does help put them at ease to know. If you say closed in May, your first mortgage payment isn't due until July 1st. You essentially skip a month, and that's because your mortgage gets paid, what the old school term is, in the rears. It basically means at the end of the month. So my mortgage payment at the beginning of July is actually for the month of June. So for people who have a lease to pay, a rent, and are worried about having that overlap of rent and mortgage, you can put their minds at ease that they've got a little bit of a window, and that's going to help them figure out if they have a little more time to do like painting or some updates, or just the transition of moving and cleaning out the old place or cleaning up the new place. And if nothing else, it can help them see that even if they want to be in a new home by June, they could still make that work with giving their notice on their lease potentially. Other than that, do they have a pre-approval? And helping them understand that that is a really important step, but you know, if they don't have one yet, that's okay. That should be their next course of action. And providing some great lenders for them is important. I have a page that I send to people as part of this packet that I give them, and it has a little bit of info in there about questions they should be asking, the kind of information the lender is going to require. I don't get heavily into how loans work because that's ever changing, and it really can be lender dependent and buyer dependent. So just finding out if they have a lender, and if not, that's totally cool. I have a number of people that could be a good fit for you. Or do you have somebody in mind? That's going to help you figure out right away. It's also a good time if they're like, yeah, I bank at Chase, so I'm going to go there. Oh, well, just to let you know, they're making some changes to their qualifications. They may require 20% down now, but don't worry if that comes up. That's not everybody. Not every lender's requiring it. So just little bits to show that you are the expert, filling them in and setting their expectations about what's going on right now. The whole time you're putting them at ease. And usually when I do this in person, and even on video, I can see it, you can tell from the time you start talking to them to the time you're done, they have relaxed. They feel more in control. They feel like they have good information. They feel empowered to move forward, and they're excited. So they go from this like nervous, concerned, and slightly hesitant to excited and empowered and informed. And that's the point of this. So make sure that you're addressing those things in little bits. And you know, you don't want to be unnecessarily positive. Like, don't totally coat it in rose-colored glasses, but you know, also don't make it a huge dramatic thing. Like, well, you know, there's going to be 10 offers, and so just be ready. You know, that doesn't excite anybody. That turns people off. So just, you know, keep that in mind, how you're delivering and how you're processing that stuff too.
Amanda,
and then, yeah.
Amanda, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you see people who have not, or start showing people homes who have not been pre-approved or have a pre-approval letter or anything like that?
I very rarely will. If I know them personally, or I know their lender's working on it, or I feel like seeing a property is going to give them some insight, I might. But I'm very clear on the front end that a seller will expect a pre-approval with an offer. And if we go look at a place and they love it, we need to decide that day to write an offer, and they need to be ready to hop to get to get their pre-approval and to be ready to write an offer. It's going to be stressful and rushed, and it's not ideal. I also tell them the benefits of having the true word from the lender that you can afford this is
Right.
going to help them feel better about what they're looking at. You know, they may think, oh, we can afford this per month. And then a lender looks at everything and they've already looked at a house they fell in love with, or they've been searching online in a price point that they can't afford. And suddenly they have to drop their dreams down a level, you know, like that's a
Sure.
bummer. Nobody wants
Yeah, that would be concerning for me, that you know, a while ago I had, you know, some people that were looking and they couldn't even get a credit card.
Yeah. And you don't want to spend all that time meeting with them, taking them to houses, getting them set up on things, and then finding out that they can't do anything. Like that's crushing. So, you know, even having a pre-conversation by phone to ask some basic questions like, are you currently employed, is not a bad idea. You could still have a buyer consultation and just say, hey, we know you're furloughed right now. Let's talk about these things. You've got time to get your ducks in a row. And we just recognize that we're not going to be able to get out there right now, but you'll be really set up for success by the time you're back at work. We can jump on it. So, you know, just make sure that everybody understands what the conversation's about and what the time frame looks like for them. And I think,
Thank you.
yeah, and I think right now, especially, it's good to keep in mind that a lot of sellers are requiring a pre-approval for showings. And this is a good opportunity for us to say, you know, it's not me, but because of what's going on, it's very understandable that if you're going to be in a person's home where they're living with their children or whomever, that you are a qualified, ready to write an offer buyer. And that means you have a pre-approval. So let's just make sure you're ready to go so we can get into whatever properties are doing showings. So it's a good opportunity to say, this is what's happening in the market right now. Let's be prepared. So it's another reason for them to do it. Getting your pre-approval is boring and not fun and nerve-wracking. And it's not the like look at houses online and go on showings part of this all, but it is extremely important. And if the pre-approval doesn't happen, nothing else will happen. So they've got to get it together and do it. There's plenty of online applications through the lenders I work with. I know Landmark does it, and UW Credit Union does it. You know, there's mortgage brokers. They make it really easy. So this shouldn't be this huge dramatic thing. And if they're going to own a house or a condo, they're going to be real adults. They need to get their act together and get a pre-approval, right? Otherwise, do not run around all over town with them. Not worth your time.
Yeah, that happened to me once.
Yeah.
Lesson
and
learned.
never again, right?
And never again.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And there are exceptions. On occasion, I will, you know, it's somebody I've worked with before and we can't get, you know, or I don't make the effort to try to get us to sit down and do a buyer consult. And I will tell you, every time it's a mess. Every time. Anybody who I'm working with that is like a drama situation, it's always because we didn't have a buyer consult. So take the time, make it happen, be direct about it, and just show them the benefits to them of doing that. There really are plenty. So the next thing I like to ask them is their preferred price. So I like to find out what they want to spend per month or what price point they think they can afford if they don't have a pre-approval. Also, if they have a pre-approval, find out what they qualified for and then what they actually want to spend. I find that especially in the under 350 price point, especially with first-time home buyers, they watched the market crumble during the recession, and they are very sensitive about not pushing their limits. So they are very, very often wanting to spend less than they are qualified for. And it's important for you to know that, because in many cases, if the house is perfect, they're willing to spend $25,000 to $50,000 more than you thought was their limit. So find out really what that picture looks like and then have that confirmed by a pre-approval. It's really important to know that, because you're going to they'll send you a house and you'll be like, what the heck? This isn't even in my MLS search for you because it's 50 grand more. And they're like, well, we can actually afford more if it's perfect. Oh, well, that would have been good to know at the beginning. So just make sure you're getting that clarified. Now, a good portion of the conversation is about what they're looking for in a home. What I like to do ahead of time, and I highly recommend doing this, is I send them a little worksheet. Now, you can send them an email or an outline or whatever you want to do, but it's giving them a task to sit down together, if it's a partnership or family, to think about what's really important to them in a home. And it's not just what they're looking for, but why. It's not just what they're looking for, it's why. Why is this important to how they live their life? That's going to give you some great insight. You can probably assume if they're a first-time home buyer, they probably want a 3+ bedroom, a 1.5 bath ideal. They don't want any major issues with the house. You know, they love open concept. They want an updated kitchen and bath. They want a fenced-in yard and ideally a 2-car garage. That's like everybody, right? Unless it's a condo. So it's important to find out the more fine details of how they live their lives. Maybe they cook a lot, and then a kitchen where they can have 2 people working at the same time is really important. Maybe they have dinner parties every week, and it's important that they have a dining room, obviously for future use. You know, maybe they have a giant family. Maybe they are minimalists and they don't want a huge place. You know, maybe they absolutely need offices at home. So just finding out the reasons why can be very insightful. So the sheet that I send over has the following information, which I always say is what determines price. It is location, obviously, size, and condition and features. So location can be municipality. It can be proximity to work or a school within a certain district. It can be near a park. It can be not on a busy street. It could be not on a corner or on a corner. It could be not on an alley or on an alley. So all those things come into play with location. Size, obviously you've got your number of bedrooms and baths, garage size, room to expand, potentially the size of the yard and how close they are to the neighbors, and if there's like finished basement space. So just getting some clarification on that. Square footage, they may or may not be familiar with. So that might be something that develops over time. And like how the space works. Like, do they really like open concept? Do they really feel like they need a family room? Get that information. And then condition and features is pretty big. And that is, you know, is it updated? Does it need work? How much work are they willing to do? Are they thinking work is like paint and change out the flooring? Or are they thinking work is like gut a kitchen? So find that out. Do they have resources to do that kind of stuff? Do they have family members who are contractors, or do they need that information? Do they have a realistic idea what that's going to cost and how long it's going to take? Set those expectations in advance. So that condition features or part is pretty broad. Features is stuff like, usually this is where the wish category comes into play. Fireplace, soaking tub, master suite, rec room, fenced in yard, stuff like that are features. And what I tell people is those 3 main categories is what determines price. So if they are keeping their price the same, then there's probably going to be some give and take on those things. So that's why the why is so important. Why is it important that you have a master suite? Why is it important that you have 4 bedrooms? Why is it important that the yard is fenced in? Are these things we can address and change in a property that, you know, might otherwise work? So having that conversation is really important. And that's why I like to categorize these into needs, like absolute must have, will not buy a house without it. Wants, which you will find many of the needs can kind of be more in the want category, and wishes. And it's just really fun to see what their wishes are, because there are times when you can find a house that has like one of those wishes and it's just the cherry on top. So needs, wants, and wishes, location, size, condition, and features. So I just break that up into a grid, and then why is the column that I tell them in advance is the most important. So I really want to know why that stuff is a need, a want, or a wish, why they need it in their life. So that's a good portion of the conversation. And I would say probably anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes of an hour long conversation is talking about that. And it's really fun for them. It's a really good insight for you into their personality. And I think it's so valuable. So really listen, take good notes. You know, tell them you're taking notes if you're in a video conference, because they'll see you looking down a lot. But you know, use that to help best serve them. So what's left after that? This is up to you. I have a booklet There are several people who've come through our office who have shared their booklets. Stale team has shared theirs. We had somebody come in from DC who shared his. They're all different, but here's the stuff I think you should really make sure you include. It doesn't necessarily have to be a book, but it should be something else you address. And I like to have some reference for it. I mean, go crazy, make a video and send them to YouTube, or you know, send them something like that, you know, watch it together, have something you can digitally send. But the things I think are important to cover, other than what we've already talked about, number one, buyer agency. Do not let that sit in the corner until you're writing an offer. Promise me you will address this now. The reason being is buyers have no idea that this exists. And if you don't talk about it, it just makes it look like you don't know what it is and you're uncomfortable with it. And at the end of the day, if you're working with somebody and you don't have a buyer agency agreement signed, they might not feel tied to you. You may think they are because you had this conversation and you're showing them homes, but you might not know. So making that very clear that this is an exclusive relationship and we're going to sign an official document is a good way to see how serious they are, and to, again, be on the same page. This is what I'm doing for you. This is how you're cooperating, and this is our relationship moving forward. I broke down the buyer agency into a chart. I would highly recommend you do some sort of breakdown of that agreement. I'm happy to share the basic points of this, but what I learned by doing this is so key that I don't want to just hand it to you. So get out the buyer agency agreement and read through it. This is part of your top 5. You should be doing this. Read through it line by line, understand what it means, be able to explain it to somebody in very simple terms. And I just broke it down onto one page and said, look, no matter who you work with, you're gonna have somebody who's arranging property showings, having an agent who's assisting with financing, so making sure you've got your pre-approval lined up, have somebody providing property information data, right? Those agent notes, the documents that are there, like the condition report, explaining forms and agreements, so contract, offer, that kind of stuff, monitoring closing, so dates and deadlines, keeping things on track, preparing a property value study to make sure that they're offering a price that makes sense, so that's CMA, another part of your top 5, and keeping your position confidential. This is also where I mentioned that if there are multiple offers, which is almost always, that they should expect that we will not know anything about those offers and no one will know anything about theirs. That's an important little note to stick in there too. Now that's any agent you work with. The benefit of a buyer's agent is having somebody who provides an access to off-market listings, which everybody knows right now is crazy important, right? Like limited inventory, you need to have an agent who's looking off-market, who's reaching out to agents directly, who's finding out about FSBOs, who's looking at delayed listings. That is going to be an advantage to them. And it's an important thing to tell them that you can do that for them as your buyer's agent. Promoting and protecting their best interests, giving them advice, negotiating on their behalf. You can tell a little bit about your negotiation strategy. I usually mention that at this point. Mine's very relationship based. I'm building relationship with that agent. We're making sure that we're pleasant to work with from the very beginning. And that's how we're kind of strategically, and also just for the sake of everything going smoother. Pointing out reasons not to buy. This is when I say, here's why we need to determine this before we go on showings. Before we go out, I need to know, can I give you advice? Can I tell you reasons not to buy? If we don't have buyer agency, if you don't have buyer agency with your agent, you should, or with your buyer, you should not be giving advice, pointing out reasons not to buy. You are working for the seller until you've got that signed. So be careful and make sure you've got your documents in order. Assisting with their best interests in mind, providing anonymity if desired, working fully on their behalf. And before I explain this to them, the first thing I tell them is, when you work in buyer agency, here's how it works with me. The seller pays the commission to my brokerage. I get a percentage of that. That's how I get paid at closing. There are no additional fees. Now, there are agents out there who do charge a buyer agency fee on top of that, that is charged directly to the buyer. It's up to you if you want to do that. Price point I work in, the people I work with, I don't feel the need to do it. And I even tell them, like, I'm really good at this. You're going to be very happy working with me, but I'm not going to charge you this. All I ask is that you continue to share my name. So it's up to you how you want to do it, but explain how you get paid. Don't be weird about it. They need to know up front that they're not going to get charged to meet with you, that, you know, you get paid at closing, so they understand how this works. You don't get paid by the contract you write, by the offer you write. It's just at the end. So explaining that's really important. You could go line by line with the document, but you're going to lose them. So just hit the high points, have something that gives them an overview. Make sure you provide them with a copy of the buyer agency and send it to them right away. Have your meeting and then send it while you're in the meeting, send it right after. Once we can meet in person again, have it with you, make sure they feel comfortable and get them to sign it. Then they feel like they are in a professional relationship and they are in the right direction. They're going to feel good about it. You're going to feel good about it. And then there's no weird mystery, because God knows you're not going to have time to explain all of that and the offer when you're writing an offer. That is not the time to talk about buyer agency. Do it before, okay? Please promise me you will take the time to do it before. It's going to work best for everybody. The other stuff I have in here is some lender suggestions, kind of how showings works. I talk about that at the end as like my call to action. Here's what's next. I have an offer quick reference that I've talked about before. It's basically just a cover page of an offer. So it has the main details in there. So the price and the earnest money and the closing date, when they reply, the contingencies. And I tell them, I've got this great page. It is, if you look at nothing else, look at this ahead of time and talk about it amongst yourselves and ask me questions, because I want them to have all of this stuff in mind before we're writing the offer. Once we're writing the offer, we've got an hour. There are 4 offers on the table. We have got to get this in quickly. I'm on the phone with them. We're doing this remotely. It is not the time to learn about what's in an offer. No, prepare them in advance. Be their advocate. So giving them something ahead of time to say, this is what's in an offer, and we're going to talk about beforehand. I want you to be empowered. I want you to make informed decisions. I want you to know what to expect. I'm not going to breeze through the largest investment of your life on paper because of the time limit. We're going to talk about this ahead of time. So having something in there that gives them that outline, that gives them the highlights, that gets them thinking about this and talking about it is key. So, and then go back to it. When you're on showings, when you're having a check-in call, let's talk more about that. Are you comfortable with that? Because if you don't, you're going to write an offer. It's going to be a blur for them. And you're going to get to inspection and they're going to flip out because they weren't expecting things, because they feel out of control, because they're worried about everything going on in the world. You've got to set them up so that they feel like in this situation, they're in control, they're informed, they are not being taken for a ride, and that they know what to expect. They're not going to get caught off guard. It is even more important right now to make sure they feel like they're in control, like they know what they're doing. It is not the time to let them flap about and just come to you with every question and think that's going to get you to a closing table. It's not. So make sure you are setting them up for success. The other thing I have in here is like a step-by-step accepted offer to closing. You can do that as a chart. You can do it as a little visual. You can do it as a game board. You can do it as all kinds of things. I do not go over this at that point, but I want them to have it for reference in a correct form and not just find something random online. I talk a little bit about how I work. You know, I come from a teaching background. I come from a fine dining background. I was in management for years. That means that I'm highly organized, that I am making sure they're well educated, that I'm going to be very straightforward with them and empower them to decide what to do. And I'm not going to tell them what to do. For me, my style is I give you your options, your potential outcomes, and it's up to you to decide, because this is not about me. This is about you. And it's important to establish those things. How do you work? What can they expect from you? What do you expect from them? Sprinkle that in or give it as a speech at the beginning, have a mission statement, figure out a way to establish that. Because it's not just about telling them what's happening in the market and how this process works. It is super, super important that you are explaining how you operate and you're making that connection, because the biggest thing you need to work for both of you is trust. And the only way to establish that is for them to understand who you are and how you operate. And it's even more important to get that across a screen, because we aren't necessarily having the opportunity to meet in person. And this market is not very friendly to buyers. So they have got to feel really solid in who they're working with. If you saw that news report that Janine Werner was in, her buyer said, you know, it was a little scary at first and we weren't sure what we were going to do. And at the end of that story, she says, what is so important is finding an agent you trust and knowing that they will take care of you. So that's what you have to get across in this meeting. That should be your goal, is make sure they understand you care about them, you're here for them, you are listening to them, and here's how you're going to provide them service and how you're going to make this work, and here's what to expect from the market. So it's a really pivotal conversation, and it feels silly and it feels like you're just being, you know, pushy with getting them to sign a buyer agency. That's not what it's about. It's about so much more than that, and that's just a piece of it. The last things I have in here are a little bit about inspections, and then I kind of see where they're at. Like, how are you feeling? Do you feel like you have a good amount of information? Do you feel like you know what you need to know to move forward? We touch on expenses from accepted offer to closing. So you need to have your earnest money in mind. 1 to 2% of the purchase price. You're going to have that within the first few days after accepted offer. Inspection, it's going to cost about $450. You got to have that within the first, 3 to 5 days after inspection. This money is coming out of your account. Be ready. Earnest money comes back to you as a credit at closing. Appraisal, it may be charged when it's ordered. It might be charged at closing costs. This is $400 to $500. Closing costs vary tremendously, $1,000 to $7,000. Depends on your lender and a lot of factors. So this is a good thing to clarify with your lender. Down payment doesn't have to be 20%. Depends on what lender you're working with these days, but it could be as low as 3.5% with a conventional loan. Most of the people I work with are in the 5 to 10% range. That helps them understand, like, oh, we can do this. When you're talking about lenders and having that bit of the conversation, you can kind of fold that in. And then last, I give them a call to action. How are you feeling? Cool. So here's our next steps. I'm going to send you the buyer agency agreement. I'm going to send you a link to my app if you haven't already. Look over that, sign it. It's best that we have that established before we go on showings. Showings can be scheduled day of. They can be scheduled in advance. We can set a block of time to go out and see a few houses side by side. That's a good thing to do. It gives you perspective. Let's talk about, do you want to set up a time right away? Do you want to look over things and get back to me? We should probably, start to get out there by, if you want to close in June, we should get out there by next week. We should get right out there. And I'm available for evenings and weekend showings. Let's set something up. When we go on showings, keep in mind, it'll be, 20 minutes to an hour. If you have a mask, make sure you've got that. I'll bring gloves. Plan to have shoe covers on. If you're not feeling well, please let me know, because we are trying to avoid the spread of COVID. Have that little bit of conversation and just say, like, this is what to expect. Here's our next steps, and this is how it's going to go. And then they feel ready. I mean, it's amazing. I talk to people, you guys, I cannot tell you how many times I've sat down with people who've said, we're thinking like maybe in the next year or so, but we don't, it's going to be a little while, but we thought we'd just start talking about it. I cannot tell you how many people I've had that conversation with. We have had a buyer consultation, and 2 weeks later, they have an accepted offer. This happens all the time because they feel informed, empowered. There's more to it than they expected, but they feel like they're ready now. There's things they were assuming that aren't true. They are ready to go now. And there's all this stuff that they just weren't sure about, and that's what was holding them back. So even if somebody says they're a year or two out, like, why not take the time to chat with them? I have somebody today who just texted me a house. We're going to go look at it today. I talked to them a week and a half ago, and they were thinking they were going to buy in the next 2 years. And now they're getting a pre-approval this morning, and we're going out and looking at a house. So take the time if they have any interest, and they might actually be a couple years out, and that's okay too, but it's good to just get out there and connect with them. If nothing else, they might say, this is a great conversation. I'm not ready, but I have a friend who's thinking about it, and I want them to get this kind of experience. So they're sharing your name. I mean, there's really no downside to doing it. Just be prepared. Make sure you have an outline. make sure you know what you're talking about. So if you need to review stats or look over the process or talk to a lender, do it. That's all part of this top 5. Be well informed. Don't just smush it together. And then make sure that you're giving them some good information on paper, digitally, whatever they can take with them. Make sure that you have their contact info and know how to best reach them. They know how to best reach you and how you operate. And make sure that you're sending out that buyer agency agreement and getting it signed shortly thereafter. So those are the key pieces of this consult, and you should be able to get this together within a week. Make this your one thing for a week and just focus on it and make time each day to work on it. Run them by each other, use each other in the launch community to run ideas back and forth, put stuff on the Facebook group. Use this community of people. It's what we all do in Keller Williams. It's why we have such great people willing to share so much. So continue to do that, build that within our launch community too. And just practice. Reach out to family members and practice with them. Reach out to each other and practice with each other. If people see that you are making efforts to do this in a quality, professional way to best empower your clients, then they're going to want to send you business. Like, just put the effort in and it's very well worth it. I'm gonna check the notes here. I've got some people who've made some comments. Any questions? Outline for template, sure. And there are some great outlines in Command as well. Yep, highly recommend that also. Does anybody else have questions? We've got a little over 10 minutes left in our workshop time today. Nothing?
Okay,
No.
okay.
Yeah.
Wait. Okay, sorry, I'm not on camera because I look like garbage. So, I have 2 people that kind of shook out of the woodwork. I know I posted a thing on launch the other day, and I'm having an impossible time getting them to like give me more than 30 minutes of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one has a trailer she has to sell, so I don't know how to deal with that.
Okay.
Before she can, I think that's kind of out of our wheelhouse. Oh my gosh, she's so cute. So I think that's out of our wheelhouse, and I was going to talk to a banker friend and get her like an appraiser information so she can sell that on her own.
Okay.
But every time I talk to her, she's like, oh, my husband's asleep, and let's talk the next day. She never actually sets anything up with me. And then the other woman that I'm talking to is in the process of getting her pre-approval. And that's duplexes. So it's like, I have these 2, but I just have to like shrink down everything I have to send them stuff and be like, we have to talk about buyer agency like now.
Mm-hmm.
So
my advice is this.
Please.
I mean, everybody has a lot going on right now, right? It's a little bit different, but at the end of the day, writing an offer is going to require that they sit down with you for an hour. Right. Getting a total pre-approval is going to require some time and effort on their part. And if they are not willing or able to make that happen now in the early stages, when they're supposed to be the most excited about this, if they are not willing to do that now, then it's not worth your time to put into them. Put them on a drip campaign, put them on auto email updates on MLS, tell them to let you know when they're ready, because this meeting is the most important thing to setting them up for success. Help them understand the value in it for them, and then try to suggest a time and see what they do with it. And if you just can't get anywhere with that, just say, you know what, the most successful this will be, it depends on the time you're putting into it. And having a meeting first is absolutely key to setting you up for success. This market is way too competitive. It's way too fast paced to figure this stuff out as we go. And so it's really, really important for your success that we have this time together beforehand. And if it's important that it's short, we'll keep it to a half hour and I'll just hit the highlights, but we need to sit down and talk.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Yeah. So what is like the right time to ask for a buyer agency agreement? Like, I know you want to kind of talk to them and first and kind of say what you do and everything, but I mean, do you want to do the buyer consultation first and then be like, let's do a buyer agency agreement, or would you do the buyer agency agreement before?
So I include buyer agency discussion as part of the consultation.
Okay.
And I don't say like, I want you to sign on with me. This is about how does this process work and what's to your best advantage. So within that conversation, I'm saying, so one of the things we need to talk about is how we're going to work together and to establish what I should be doing for you and what you're going to be doing in participation of this is through a buyer agency agreement or not. And so you need to know the opportunity you have here. So, you know, this is what it will cost or not cost you. In most cases, it's the seller paying the commission unless you as an agent decide to charge them an additional fee. And then here's the benefits. And I just explain it that way. These are the benefits of how we would work together. These are the things I'm allowed to do for you legally, only if we have this agreement. And every time they're like, yes, we for sure want that. Because who wouldn't? I mean, the only time anybody doesn't, I think it's like less than 1% of the people I've ever worked with don't want it. And it's because they're investors who don't want me to do much at all but write the offer.
Okay.
Other than that, it's pretty much everybody, and it's really to their advantage. So I wouldn't necessarily bring it up as like, so we have to sign this thing and it like ties you to me. And so can you just, you know, do that? And it's like an awkward thing. Tell them how this establishes your relationship, what you're going to do for them. It really clears things up and makes them feel secure that you are in a professional relationship and that they have like a jumping off point. Make it part of that conversation in your consult and then send it to them either right before you meet, you know, while you're in your meeting or right after. Don't wait. And then say like, you know, take a look over it, sign it. And then once we have that signed, we can get out on showings. So the sooner you sign that, the sooner we can get out there. And they pretty much always sign it right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? That's it? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. It's nice to see some new names. Not many faces today, but thanks for listening. I would say if you do not have a focus for this week, make this your focus. You've got a really good jumping off point. You have a bunch of stuff in your head, hopefully some notes. You know, take some time, set aside some uninterrupted time to piece together the outline of your consult. And based on what that conversation is going to look like, it will help you build out what you actually need, documents or something to create or something to just have available in a file that you can email to people, but have, you know, have that as your starting point. Make sure your outline is addressing what needs to be done. Remember why you're doing this. You know, you're establishing your relationship. You should be building trust. You want to make sure you've got your ducks in a row on the technical side, their contact info, what they do for a living, when they're available for showings. Make sure they understand how you operate and what to expect from you and what background you're coming from. Make sure they understand what the market's doing right now and that you set those expectations for how quickly they're going to have to move and what they're going to need in order to write an offer, what the time frame looks like, what's that going to cost them, and what their next steps should be. That is all so important generally, but especially now. There's so much unexpected, there's so much uncertainty around that you want to make this as certain and succinct and set for them as you can, because they're going to make stronger, clearer decisions. They're going to move more confidently through this, and it's going to make everything smoother. So just remember all along the way, you're setting expectations, you're checking in, you're letting them know you're there for them. This is emotional, even more so right now. It's a huge investment. It is so important that they know that you're there for them and you're not just unlocking doors and talking about, you know, kitchens. Like there's way more to working with an agent. And they need to understand that. And you're going to get so much helpful info out of this conversation that you will way better serve them. So just make sure you're taking the time to do this. It seems silly. It seems extra. It seems above and beyond. It's not. Everybody should be doing this, and they don't. And that's how you're going to stand out as a great agent. That's how I work with so many people every year, because I do this stuff and it blows people away. And it's really simple. This is basic stuff. This doesn't take a genius to figure out. So make sure you're doing it. Make sure you're taking the time, and make sure you're practicing. Practice, practice, practice on each other, in the mirror, with your family. Do not practice on your clients. That is malpractice. Make sure you are doing this in advance. That's exactly why we have the top 5. That's a great way to use your time right now. I am telling you, Elizabeth had a great video this week on the launch page about how she's just been putting it out there and being positive, doing what she needs to do, and business is just coming to her. And I know that sounds crazy, but I'm telling you guys, if you get these 5 lined up, if you know what you're talking about, you feel confident, you have your ducks in a row, you are ready to work with whoever at whatever time, you are going to get business. So take the time to do this stuff. Prospecting is important, but if you can't service the people you attract to you, then what's the point? Make sure you've got this stuff in place so that you can best serve your people. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You're going to make adjustments along the way. I'm always making tweaks here and there. Every year I'm adjusting. That's okay. But start with something and use each other in the community as your sounding boards and help each other, hold each other accountable. You know, take advantage of this great community that we have in Keller Williams. Cool. We're done a few minutes early because we went over a little bit last week. If you guys need anything, you have questions, you know, jump on the Facebook group for launch. You better be on there. If you're not, get on there. You know, reference the YouTube channel for videos. Reach out to the hotline. Make sure you're telling them if it's an information 411 or if it's an emergency 911. And know that if I haven't talked to you yet, I am still making calls. So we're here for you, and our whole community is. So really, there's no excuse for not getting these things done, getting these top 5 together, and really being the rock star agent that I know you can be. Put in the time, you're gonna see it come back to you. Cool. Have an awesome week. Rewatch this on the YouTube channel once it's up to help you get that outline together. And I really look forward to hearing about your buyer agency presentations and consultations very soon. Thanks a lot. Have an awesome day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.